This demonstration used just 5 ounces of my latest toxin. Tomorrow, this will seem like child's play. Gotham, this is your only warning.
Scarecrow over time, not just in the Arkham Knight, but even in Arkham Asylum, has grown on me a lot. I'm actually a little embarrassed to say, after almost 8 years following the release of the Arkham Knight, I'm barely giving this villain the recognition and frankly the respect he deserves, even though on some levels Rocksteady didn't really do the same. For a very long time, the only Arkham game that I've ever experienced was the Arkham Knight. To be completely honest with you, the combat was perfect, in my humble opinion. While I didn't play the previous entries to really compare it to them per se, for what it was on its own, it was a great experience. I had no complaints with it, and while the story at times had some, let's say, moments where I felt I wanted a little more, every time I was wanting or craving that little extra tidbit or an additional appearance from this or that villain, the inner Joker fan in me had no reason to complain any further about any of the other villains or characters' intentions because my favorite villain was right by my side. The very fact Batman was poisoned with Joker's blood, allowing him to just imagine Joker haunting him through the entire story to only be topped off with the finale, when Batman finally is forced to face the very thing he's been putting off for the entire night. It was just an element of the game that honestly stole any reason for me to care about anything else. Mark Hamill as a Joker will always be something I'm just a sucker for. Yes, if you can't tell by now, I'm a Joker fanboy.
Need to take my temperature? I'd be happy to drop my pants.
Anyways, sure, the Arkham Knight was a threat, albeit one that was severely undermined due to his role he played, which is really nothing more than a small roadblock. I mean, his biggest help to the main villain, that being Scarecrow, was his valuable knowledge of who Batman was. Personal knowledge on Batman's fighting style, who his allies were, and his weaknesses within the armor he donned on.
No. You're not going anywhere, old man. Tri-weave titanium-coated armor plating. Nice. Unless you know exactly where to shoot.
In some ways, the Arkham Knight's main goal of killing Batman just made him a laughable villain because the person he served refused to let Batman die, as he had his own idea of what Revenge on the Dark Knight was meant to be.
Time to die, old man.
In death, he has nothing left to fear. Keep him away from Ace Chemicals. Your vengeance will come.
The concept and overall idea of the Arkham Knight is one that I love, but I don't think anyone can really deny that it's his capabilities and full damage he could have waged on Batman and the entire Bat family, just strictly due to his own knowledge and entire militia behind him. But the Arkham Knight was horribly circumvented. He could have easily served as the main villain within the game, but instead Rocksteady opted to tell a very unique revenge story. A revenge story that involved Jonathan Crane, otherwise known as Scarecrow, to repay Batman for what he cost him many years ago. That was his face, his identity, his sense of belonging in the world, if he even had it anymore. Crane, after a mauling received by the villain known as Killer Croc, ended in him becoming permanently disfigured.
Too late, Batman! One step closer, and this goes into the water. The cave will fill with your deepest, darkest nightmares, and you will never reach your precious venom roots.
Don't do it, Crane!
His face was torn apart and his leg appears to have been permanently broken, fastened in a leg brace. This is why we are seeing this more realistic, ghoulish appearance he has in the Arkham Knight. After the injuries sustained at the hands of Killer Croc, Jonathan Crane decided to become one with his alter ego, the Scarecrow, and so decided to surgically graft pieces of his mask into remnants of the flesh on his face. Jonathan Crane, in wake of those horrible injuries, was no more. The person, the identity, the renowned and even feared psychologist no longer existed. All that remained was Scarecrow, the embodiment of fear, the symbol of a broken and ultimately destroyed psyche of a man who wants Batman to drop to his knees and be stripped down, reduced to the man Scarecrow knows he is behind that mask. In his final message to Batman at the very end of the game, when they are face to face and Scarecrow is going to administer yet another dose of his fear toxin, he says what he's wanted all along: to have the world afraid, to have Batman afraid.
I don't care who you are, but they will. I'm going to rob them of hope. As they stare into your eyes, they will blame you. Failure will have a face and a name.
Their hero is not who they think he is. He may be a symbol, he may be a beacon of hope, but his entire night of him putting his life on the line time after time, apprehending Gotham's most wanted, back to back, saving the city from a gas cloud that was tearing it to shreds, and even making Batman sicker, giving even more power to the hold Joker's blood had on his body and ultimately his psyche. Batman's body, his mind, and really his overall will was put through hell in this game. And even with all of that on the line, with all his successes, no matter how grand or how small, he still can't control what's going to happen to him. And he can't control what's going to happen to the people that look up to him.
Do you know what happens when a man refuses to be controlled by his fears? He must face them.
What's interesting about this and Crane's journey is none of it's directly told to us, at least in terms of what exactly happened to him and why he looks so dramatically different. While we witness firsthand his disappearance and attack by Killer Croc in Arkham Asylum, we don't see or hear from him ever again. I mean, at the end of that game, there's 3 different endings during the game's end credits where there's a crate of Titan floating in the water, and Killer Croc, Bane, or Scarecrow's hand can be seen reaching out of the water and grabbing it, which by itself led to a variety of theories. Considering Arkham Asylum came out in 2009, there was obviously no indication of what was going to happen in the next Arkham game. Fast forward 2 years later when Arkham City released, and for the most part Scarecrow was ultimately absent. Now in hindsight we know some amount of details, but at that point in time, Scarecrow was not a major presence. As a matter of fact, Batman had no concrete evidence of Scarecrow even being alive. If I'm not mistaken, I believe there was even a side quest where there's some dead bodies you'd come across inside of Arkham City where their faces are completely torn apart, and witness accounts claim that Bruce Wayne was the murderer who dumped the bodies there, which also fed a little bit more into the fan theory of where Scarecrow is, because the conversation that Oracle has with Batman specifically mentions Jonathan Crane and the effects that his fear toxin had on Batman last time. Who's to say that Bruce Wayne really wasn't the killer and Batman just doesn't remember?
Bruce, I don't know how to say this, but...
What's wrong, Barbara?
I've been thinking about the identity theft case. Don't get angry. But how can you actually be sure that it wasn't you who killed those people? I mean, they were your fingerprints at the scene.
What did you say?
Not intentionally, but clearly you're not well. That place is full of maniacs who could take advantage of a situation like that. Think about it. What if Crane got to you again? You know Strange's reputation. Maybe he planted the idea back when you met him. I don't like it, but...
It wasn't me. I'm sure it wasn't.
Yeah, of course. I'm sorry. I just, well, you know.
But even with a major presence lacking, that doesn't mean Scarecrow wasn't a threat or planning something behind the scenes. There was no shortage of clues alluding to something big on the horizon, and these clues range in various things, from a dropped Scarecrow's mask that you can find out on top of the bridge in Amusement Mile, There's some fear toxin you can find out in the open world or in certain sections, and there's even some documents in the world, if I'm not mistaken, if you really go looking for it. But the major Easter egg is, after beating the game using the cryptographic sequencer, you can reveal 3 separate messages on 3 various signals at the end of a chime. Utilizing Batman's cryptographic sequencer, the 3 messages can be read as follows. In order, they read, "I will return, Batman. You will pay for what you have done to me." And the final message says, "Fear will tear Gotham to shreds." Scarecrow was far from seeking rehabilitation. Instead, he was diving deeper into his obsession, an obsession of the human mind and the effects fear and being afraid could have on a person's mind. Scarecrow hid, biding his time, perfecting his fear toxin and purifying it to a level where a small dose of just 5 ounces was enough to descend an entire diner filled with normal people to monsters, tearing each other apart, tricked into thinking they're defending themselves from the worst things their minds could perpetuate. Whether Rocksteady intended to have this revenge arc of Scarecrows to be the main purpose of finishing off a beloved series such as the Arkham games years later, or if it was just something they just decided sometime after the conclusion of Arkham Asylum to breathe some amount of life into this curious concept, to see how far along the ideas such as this could really grow. Whatever the case of the red herrings in Arkham City to what we got in Scarecrow's intentions in the Arkham Knight, I can't deny it's a unique vision and story of someone who took their obsession, their knowledge, and research to such an extreme. Mind you, Scarecrow before was already a threat, and his fear toxin was nothing to scoff at. During Arkham Asylum, from a presentation perspective, Scarecrow's introduction, to this day, I think is one of the best ever in a video game. Honestly, there's even some layers to peel back with it. On the surface level, it's very terrifying and there's enough to praise it for without delving too deep into it. You have some Arkham inmates trapped inside a room where Batman is forced to helplessly watch them struggle and panic, succumbing to Scarecrow's devious concoction.
There is no Crane. They're all over me! Only Scarecrow.
Get me out of here, please, someone!
It's a firm kick in the gut that, hey, this is not your world here. Yet again, you're not in control. Seeing them panic and Batman's adrenaline to get to them is amazing, but honestly, the fact we don't see Scarecrow himself, we're just given his shadow on the wall right after he says there's no one here by the name of Crane, only Scarecrow. It's just a phenomenal and beautiful scene. It was actually here too where I mistakenly believed Batman inhaled the fear gas himself, a belief that's reinforced with Joker saying, "The doctor has started early. Your appointment isn't for hours. I'm sure you'll be buzzed through when he's ready. Tell me, Bats, what are you really scared of?"
Ooh, it looks like the good doctor has started early. Your appointment isn't for hours. I'm sure you'll be buzzed through when he's ready. Tell me, Bats, what are you really scared of?
It alludes to you being exposed already, which is driven home even further when a few seconds later you see Commissioner Gordon on the floor begging for Batman to save him, and then he's eerily pulled off screen. A few seconds later you find Gordon, his seemingly lifeless body sitting up against the wall. Batman wasn't able to save him in time and is clearly distraught by his failure. A failure he tries to relate to its outside help, Oracle. Her father didn't make it.
I'm sorry, Jim. Barbara. I'm sorry. I was too late.
I'm sorry. The number you've dialed isn't available. Please leave a message after the tone.
Barbara, are you there?
Please hang up your phone.
But the communication to her is dead. If you couldn't tell from the odd telephone number operator popping up in place of a private line of communication that's most likely very highly sophisticated, instead of static or just silence, Batman is met with what you would find when a number has just usually been disconnected, which is a dead giveaway, but Batman's glowing eyes and Gordon's dead body on top of that were just all signs pointing that nothing is right. You have been exposed, and things continue to get freakier as you make your way over to the morgue. But if we can backtrack just a moment here, Batman is actually exposed on the elevator down into the morgue just moments before seeing the inmates panic and suffer at the hands of Scarecrow. It's foresight into horror. He's just moments away from experiencing himself, and he doesn't even know it yet. And my first time, I didn't even realize it. I was so busy with the Joker's conversation, with Joker taunting that he can kill Batman at any moment. And then he finishes off the call with just facing all of your fears.
Too easy. Oh, think about it. I've got you trapped in a little metal box, hanging precariously over a deadly drop. What say I just blow the emergency brakes and drop you like a sack of puppies? Say goodnight, Bats. Boom! Only kidding. Got a few more surprises in store for you. Prepare to face your fears. All of them!
In hindsight, it's a duh moment. But in my first playthrough, and honestly even in my second playthrough, where I wasn't paying hyper close attention, it still flew over my head. Joker took my attention over so much, it just didn't register when I was paying attention. I never realized gas was starting to seep into the elevator and Batman was just casually coughing because of it. It's a build-up to something that even though you see coming, you don't have it glaringly obvious in front of you as to when that build-up exactly begins. And in a time where games have gotten to the point of insulting players by just throwing exposition at you left and right, leaving little to no room for us to digest what it is we're going through, or important story beats, or how certain events came to fruition. Because this was a little less obvious, at least for me, it made the entire moment age like fine wine. And then that leads me to the fear toxin during this game. Again, it's no joke. Batman suffers hallucinations of his dead parents in body bags, telling him to not let them die, and he should have stood up to their killer like a man. Later on, he re-experiences the death of his parents in Crime Alley, walking down a hallway, reliving the memory of being a frightened little child who just witnessed his parents slain in cold blood. Bruce walks down this hallway as a little kid with his head down, tears streaming down his face, with Gordon and another cop talking in the background of what just happened to this poor little kid. One of the cops even seems to have no remorse, saying he's going to be just fine with all the money he has. He's got a butler. The butler's on the way. Why should we worry about what's going to happen to this billionaire kid? Everything will work out. In the later, stronger hallucination segment, which is done as well as the introduction to Scarecrow was, Rocksteady full-on throws in a jump scare by making the game appear to freeze and crash, only for it to seemingly reboot back to the game's introduction, only this time there are some alterations. The bat signal is replaced by Scarecrow's insignia. Joker is now the one driving the Batmobile to the quote-unquote madhouse, or Arkham Asylum, with Batman seemingly a scattered, disoriented, and frightened mess. It's a complete role reversal. Joker escorts a tied-down Batman, all while the PSA system, Harley, and Scarecrow call him crazy. On the opposite side of bars, you see Gordon, Aaron Cash, all the security guards, and the warden Quincy Sharp begging for Batman to help them, that they're going to be put outside and executed. It's just a barrage of failure after failure, with Scarecrow citing the death of Batman's parents being the reason he's gone insane.
Just got to check your prisoner, dear.
Whatever. Just be quiet. It's not looking too good.
No, he's not. We really should feel sorry for him. He never fully got over his parents' death. It left him quite insane. What is going on inside your head, Wayne? He's gone. Just a twisted shell of a man.
While each portion is tastefully done in their own right, it's when you take a step back and see each one of these hallucination segments have a grand theme. They're tied to Batman's own insecurities and fears, of course. Fear of failure, fear of losing the ones he loves, not just his parents, but Gordon too, and in a sense, losing himself. It's all just a trick, an elaborate mind game to make him lose control. from reliving traumatic events to dealing with the negative sides of being Batman and being called crazy, or just one move away from being the same as the criminals he hunts down. On one hand, it's a reflection of Batman's fears from Arkham Asylum, and when exposed to the more potent fear toxin of the Arkham Knight version, his fears in reality is of course different due to the circumstances, Joker's blood, and the terrifying reality of what happens if Batman transforms into the Joker. Ultimately, it transforms his fears into something else, which could also lead into the discussion of Batman growing and possibly even developing a little bit of immunity to Scarecrow's weaker fear toxin from the first game. And then you can add a little bit of realism and add to it that as people grow and change and evolve, their fears or priorities start to switch up. However, I'd wager that not only does it show the difference between the potency of Asylum's fear toxin and Arkham Knight's fear toxin, but it can also describe the shift in Crane's overall objective, with the evidence based off of one single thing. In Arkham Asylum, you can tell when you're under the effects. It's apparent, not only does the world transform around you, but going back to the moment where Batman tries to communicate with Oracle under the fear toxin, there's a sense of time lost and some confusion. And to give us that idea, it's when he snaps out of this first hallucination and he establishes contact with Oracle again. And of course, he's an entirely different spot from before, not only when he was talking to Oracle, but before he started hallucinating and have these psychological effects take over. His delusions take over his reality in a different way. A good example of that is when you're fighting skeletons and it's revealed those perceived skeletons you were fighting was actually inmates that were attacking you. Or when you're climbing this broken tower to get up to the bat signal to break the effects of a toxin, basically symbolizing Batman strengthening his own will to break himself free, which you end up doing, and then you realize you're at the top of the clock tower. So there is a parallel to the real world. You are still moving, you're just delusional as to what you're actually doing. You're in a world where Crane is completely in control. While his toxin is potent in this game, it's still an element of something that he ultimately seeks and thoroughly enjoys, that being power. Something that's evident by him being so incredibly large while Batman and everything is so tiny by comparison. It's a power dynamic. It's something that he enjoys, and that's confirmed by his cartoonish, over-the-top joy and just reveling in the chaos that the fear these people are experiencing because of him are suffering from. The effects, while terrifying, lets the victims know Crane is in control here. In the Arkham Knight, the delusions don't take hold quite the same. Instead of the world bending around you, reminding you that you're not in control here, instead Batman's fears are realized in what appears to be the real world, making it even more difficult to get a hold of himself and understand what he's seeing and hearing isn't real. And I'm not necessarily talking about the Joker here, who's just a mental projection of Batman's biggest fear. And with the Joker giving life-accurate information or opinions on things that are actually happening, just goes to show the new level of potency this fear toxin really exhibits. But let's take the death of Barbara Gordon, for instance. Batman sees her kill herself, while Crane, this time not taking front and center, instead stepping aside and letting Batman's fear really sit and mess with him. Crane instead stands off the side and reminds him, just give up, because the more you fight, the more you continue, the more you're going to cost the lives of everyone you love. He's no longer a caricature or a cartoon of himself. He's a real proper villain, not using the fear toxin as a tool for just a small ego boost to get himself a leg up above everybody else, but instead using it to the best way he can to really make those around him suffer. And it doesn't even seem like something he gets gratification out of anymore. He's cold, he's calculated, and he's determined. But another element I wanted to get to was, as soon as Barbara pops herself off, Batman immediately communicates with Alfred. There's no loss of reality, seemingly there's no loss of reality. There is no inability to communicate with anybody outside of this room. He can still articulate, he can still describe what happened.
You won't get me. I won't let you get me.
You will bring death to all who follow you.
Sir, what's happened?
She's gone, Alfred.
What do you mean?
Barbara. Scarecrow was punishing me. He killed her.
No. Oh, my... Well, sir, we need to focus. The people of Gotham need you.
I should have protected her, Alfred. She's dead because of me.
Sir,
Please listen. Stagg's files have revealed what the cloudburst does. It's a dispersal device. Sir, don't you see? Scarecrow has the means to engulf the entire city in fear toxin. You stopped him from making it operational, but it's only a matter of time. Sir, did you hear me?
He heard you. He's wondering how he can live with himself.
Master Bruce, don't let Miss Gordon's death... Don't let it be for nothing.
By parallel, when he found Gordon in Arkham Asylum, he couldn't communicate or connect with Oracle. I think this is the closest we could get as far as a one-to-one situation, showing how vastly different this fear toxin and this Scarecrow is from the one we seen years before in the asylum. It's one that gave up on the joy of his alter ego and just accepted this is all that he is now, the purest form of fear and vengeance, with the objective of making Batman and all those who make the mistake of looking up to him or helping him will suffer. He's a villain that, honestly, if it wasn't for the unforeseen sickness and possible reality that made Batman's fear change, may well have made the Scarecrow the ruler of Gotham. He meticulously broke down everything that would have undone Batman. He captured Barbara Gordon, made us believe she's dead. He made Jim seemingly betray Batman. He raided the clock tower, submerged the entire city in a cloud of fear toxin, and knew first-hand knowledge on Batman's closest associates and how his armor works thanks to the help of the Arkham Knight. Crane lied years in wait, systematically finding a way to break this city and everything Batman cherishes. Everything this symbol, everything this icon stood on. He had the blueprints, the foundations. Yet because of something he was unaware of, fear, or at least the fear he believed Batman had, held no power over the Dark Knight.